Thank you very much to everybody that has put a lot of work into this. I'm very happy to see this report come to the committee and all the work that is taking place. And I'm very pleased to see the approach that is taken, being gradual in taking a risk assessment of each of the trees rather than, as you mentioned, going for the cheapest option. I think it's important to do that regular review. So thank you for that. I'm very conscious that our time together is limited, and we will have an election that might make this chamber look quite different. So my first question is, how do we future-proof this program to ensure that it remains high on the agenda, so that if there's a very different group of people in the next meeting, that this will remain, what can we do at this stage to make sure that this remains a priority? I'm not entirely sure who would be able to answer that question. The other question that I'd like to ask is, you've mentioned that the disease in Worcester is spreading slowly, and I'm guessing that comes from the regular review of the different trees. I'm just a little bit curious about the methodology, exactly how one makes that assessment. Not too technical, but how exactly do you know that?
Yeah, I'll do the second one, and then Lloyd will pick up the first one. We're using a process that another council had already adopted, which is the canopy measure. So obviously, in order to get the best out of the canopy measure, you need a canopy. So it's that springtime check. So it's down to a number of factors, including how thin the canopy is, but it can be from other things as well. So you need additional knowledge on other fungal, because obviously this is what happens, isn't it? We solely focus on one, and possibly to the detriment of others. So it's a question of the canopy cover is the first, then the lesions. If the canopy cover is affected by something else, but you've also got the black lesions are the final phase. So it's just a question of being able to monitor that canopy, really. But as I said, unless you've got a very good knowledge, there are other things that could be causing that, which aren't as devastating as ash dieback. So, and that's what the tree officer obviously will be bringing with them, is that senior knowledge of trees, and that's what we are employing to, so that it'll be uncommon on them. But Alvin, who used to be a tree officer here and is now tree officer planning, is out there, and I've already had Redditch as tree officer with me on a couple of occasions to assess as best he can without the canopy. So I've already utilised others in the interim, so we've not been left sort of without a tree expert with us through this process, and that's through partnership working.
Just in respect to the first question, Chair, as Doug has said, we intend to bring an annual report back to this committee. So for me, that keeps this matter on the committee's agenda, and we'll make sure that's put onto the forward plan. Some councillors have put ash dieback onto their corporate risk register. I think, subject to approval tonight, I'm not necessarily saying we need to do that, because we now have a strategy in place and an action plan to support that. But we will, in the March committee, be talking to you about the committee scorecard for next year. And members may want to indicate a preference to see the delivery of the strategy and the action plan on next year's committee scorecard, so you will then get a quarterly update from us.
Yes, go ahead.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. What would be the involvement of parish councils in relevant areas if there are particular woodlands that affect the areas that they're responsible for? Will they be consulted? Will there be a formal consultation process, and will they have the power of approving or disapproving certain actions in that process?
Yes, we always talk, and it talks about the communication plan, which is key. So if we're looking at a particular area, and we're looking at removing 6 mature trees, which could have an impact on. It'll be a question of consultation, but also an offer through the grant scheme of a replacement planting scheme. But if they are dangerous to the public, it doesn't. Not that it doesn't matter what the parish thinks, but obviously it's incumbent on us to protect. But we would make sure that we explain, and that's the thing with this is having that measured approach means that we are just steadily going around removing obvious dangerous ones whilst we monitor the rest, because obviously replacing trees takes years. So I've got a problem at Ashwood in that the natural burial ground, which is a beautiful area, is surrounded by them. So we're monitoring them, but if I was to take them all out, that just leaves houses on two corners. So it's a question of just being very cautious and careful. So yes, there will be consultation, but on occasion we will have to say, well, it's got to come out, it's dangerous, but here's the package of what we're going to do to replant, etc.
Apologies, one last question. I see the sum of £65,000. In my mind, that seems quite low for what we need, and I just wonder whether this is a number that comes from what we can afford or a number that comes from what we need, and whether we need to find ways of bridging the gap or finding ways of lobbying central government to get more funding.
So Doug has looked into what we feel we need for the year. So this isn't about what we can afford. This is about what we think we need. And as Doug said, we've got our own team to undertake, hopefully, the majority of the work. But what this does, it gives us the flexibility to call in sort of more specialist resource. And the other thing it does is it'll mean that we're not taking our core team off their sort of day-to-day work. And we'll try and supplement any further costs we need from grants. There aren't a huge number of grant opportunities out there at the moment, but there are some. But to come back to the key question, this is what we feel we need for this year, not just what we can afford.
Forgot one thing. We are training up others across the council on tree management, so which is quite important. So there's 3 coming out of bereavement to be trained as well. So it'll take time, but we've already recognised the need to have a more sustainable team and a larger team. So, for example, the way that would work is they would be working on perhaps lower level tree work on Ashwood, which means that the tree team are actually able to target the more difficult areas. So it gives them more freedom to go for the climbing cuts, etc. So yeah, there is all that as well. So we are recognising the need to add, so we can actually make them work better for us, more efficiently on things like ash. But there are other things, you know, in other species that have been affected by all sorts. So we need to. It's a question of not losing sight of the wider tree management as well. Ash is the only one of many different things.